Paul Lafargue was a French revolutionary Marxist, socialist journalist, literary critic, political writer, and activist. He was Karl Marx's son-in-law, having married his second daughter Laura. His best-known work is The Right to be Lazy. Born in Cuba to French and Creole parents, Lafargue spent most of his life in France, with periods in England and Spain. This lecture is a tribute to him. The lecture is titled Artificial Intelligence and Exponential Technologies as Fundamental Game Changers. What might the future hold? And will be delivered by Kevin Sanders, Vice President, People Program International and Palmer Institute, USA. The lecture will be chaired by Professor Mikhail Pavlov. I request our speaker and chair to please come on stage. Mikhail U. Pavlov is an associate professor of political economy and co-chairperson of the Center of Socioeconomic Studies at the Faculty of Economics of Lomonosov Moscow State University. He's a member of the editorial board of the journal Questions of Political Economy and the author of over 70 published articles, including A New Energy Paradigm for the Third Millennium, published in World Affairs. Professor Mikhail, can I please request you to take over the proceedings?
I want to introduce Kevin M. Sanders, Vice President, People Program International and Palmer Institute, USA. And this is very interesting topic on modern questions, modern problem, artificial intelligence and exponential technologies as fundamental game changers. What might the future hold?
Thank you.
Yes,
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, good. I probably don't even need the mic to be heard, but I'll use it anyway. First, I want to say...
This position.
You want to use that one? Okay.
Yes.
He's the boss. Okay, you can still hear me. Great, okay. First of all, I want to say this has been a very enlightening, enriching experience. I've made some friends and colleagues, and I'd like to say thank you for all the great service here at the hotel. Everyone has been extremely grateful to and helpful. I should say I'm very grateful, and everyone has been very helpful. I had one or two moments when I definitely needed some help, needed some medicine, and the host came through for me on that, and that was very good. I guess I should just dive right into it. Okay. Futurists, by definition, are concerned with the likelihood of certain outcomes as can be reasonably projected over a period of time. Certain futurists are concerned with more than just the predictability of the future, and in fact work towards securing certain future outcomes. As one of those futurists, Peter Diamandis, who I will be addressing in this lecture, says, "The best way to predict the future is to create it yourself." This, of course, has been true since the idea of planning was birthed in our brains. Capitalists have forever bent over backwards to secure their future profits and profitability through a variety of ethical, unethical, legal, illegal, and extra legal means. Leaders of nations have sought to secure what they saw as in their best interest through domestic means and foreign interventions. As mankind tilts into, depending on how one defines it and where you are as well, the third or fourth industrial revolution, more on that later, our technologies have never been more powerful and capable of shaping the futures of individuals, cities, nations, and the world. In fact, the term industrial is perhaps less applicable as to how that term has been used in the past. Although information technologies are having a very profound effect on industries, obsolescing many of them, they certainly are and will transform other industries into newer, less recognizable forms and jobs for people. Jobs yet to be created, as past ones will be eliminated. So harnessing these information technologies, oops, lost my place for a second. Okay, so harnessing these information technologies for the good of people instead of profit is an obvious concern for those of us interested in having brighter, more abundant, satisfying, humane lives for the billions living now and the billions yet to come. To be clear, these information technologies are digital, that is, computer-based and computer-powered. Because these information technologies have the ability to disrupt and rapidly accelerate change, and indeed change the paradigms in their fields, they are usually referred to by their proponents as exponential technologies. Examples of these exponential technologies are artificial intelligence, usually referred to as AI, digital biology and biotechnology, medicine, digital fabrication, data science, augmented reality or AR, and virtual reality, VR, nanotechnology, data science, robotics, networks and computing system, and autonomous vehicles. They are characterized typically by doubling in power or halving in price performance every year. I'll repeat that. They are characterized typically by doubling in power and or halving in price performance every year. This, of course, has very important implications for economies of the future. Their proponents believe that their real disruptive transformative power lies in their synergistic combinations in solving problems or creating new things. One telling example of their exponential nature is given by foremost scientist and futurist Ray Kurzweil. Speaking of the Human Genome Project, he said, "The Human Genome Project, which was begun in 1990, was projected to take 15 years and funded for $3.3 billion. After 7 years, Kurzweil says only 1% of the human genome had been completed. Skeptics, such as mainstream scientists, said that at that rate, it would take 100 or perhaps 700 years for the project to be completed. Kurzweil saw things differently, confidently pronouncing it was almost done. By 2003, it was completed. Kurzweil's analysis was based on his perspective of this as an information technology project, which had to be evaluated based on its exponential power as opposed to linear progression. What this means is this: exponential progression is based on doubling with every step. Hence, after reaching 1%, it would take less than 7 doubles to get to 100%. And that's exactly what happened. Then the cost of gene sequencing after 13 years was $1 billion. Today, the sequencing of a person's genome can cost less than $100. Moore's Law, which I'm sure there are those of you in the audience who are familiar with, is another example of an exponential progression. Even beyond Moore's Law, which speaks more exactly to the impact of transistor power in computing, is computer power doubling twice as fast as many transistors are put on a chip every 18 months. Kurzweil has demonstrated that the exponential progression of computing is applicable even back into the era of electromechanical and vacuum tube computing. Artificial intelligence, one of the exponential technologies, has been around for more than half a century, founded as an academic discipline in 1956. AI is considered intelligence demonstrated by machines or devices, referred to also as machine learning, or more specifically in our era, computer programs as intelligent agents. More specifically, quote, the simulation of human intelligence processes by machines. These processes include the acquisition of information and rules for using the information, reasoning, using the rules to reach approximate or definite conclusions, and self-correction, end quote. Two fairly well-known examples of AI achievements are Deep Blue's, that's a computer of course, Deep Blue's defeat of then current world champion Garry Kasparov, and IBM's defeat of the two greatest Jeopardy champions by sizable margins. Perhaps less known is AlphaGo's defeat of the best Go players, Lee Sedol and Qi Ji. The latter is seen as a more significant milestone in AI progress for at least two reasons. Go is a vastly more complex game than chess, and AlphaGo's expertise at Go was gained in part by programmers instructing AlphaGo to learn by playing matches against itself, not merely by learning from human strategies. And a newer version, AlphaGo Zero, defeated AlphaGo in games 100-0. AlphaGo was so powerful because it was no longer constrained by the limits of human knowledge. In another example of the power of AI and how it could reshape medical practice, Diagnostic speaks of its diagnostic potentials. Quote, there's no possible way in the world that any physician is going to be able to keep up with the amount of data being generated. Hundreds of gigabytes of data per person. It's not even feasible. The way that IBM's Watson was able to diagnose a patient who had a rare form of leukemia that no physician was able to diagnose. And the way Watson did this was to ingest 20 million different clinical data sets. And it was able to understand her diagnosis in the context of 20 million others. Although exponential technologies are obvious pace setters in scientific and technological history, futurists such as Ray Kurzweil, Michio Kaku, a theoretical physicist and the co-founder of string theory, Diagnostic, Jeremy Rifkin, and others believe AI and other exponential technologies are also fundamental game changers of human history. The future being a post-capitalist one is frequently referred to by them as a result of these technologies. How is it that these technologies are, if they are right, capable of redefining the course of capitalism and even our destiny as human beings? Kurzweil, a nonpareil inventor and theoretician with an impressive track record of predictions, says it's in part because of what's called the technological singularity. The technological singularity is a time in the future when an artificial superintelligence, that is, an AI, will abruptly trigger runaway technological change that will be so rapid and impact so profound that every aspect of human life will be irreversibly transformed. AI will surpass human intelligence because of what he has labeled the law of accelerating returns. That states, in essence, because we use technology to create the next and better technology, and technology being an evolutionary process, not unlike biological evolution, is subject to paradigm changes at an accelerating pace. The term singularity itself was borrowed from physics, which refers to black holes or the infinitesimally small point that preceded the Big Bang. He believes we will experience thousands of years, that is exponential change, of progress over the 21st century instead of 100 linear years after the event of the singularity. But since 1980, Kurzweil has charted the course of information technology into the past beyond even electromechanical computing and found that exponential progression has not been limited to modern computers as predicted by Moore's law. This progression has held despite disastrous events or shocks to human society. That was also the topic of a discussion in 2001 after the World Trade Towers attacked at a meeting of the Kansas City Federal Reserve Bank, where economists Lawrence Summers and J. Bradford DeLong presented a paper, quote, "The New Economy, Background, Historical Perspective, Questions, and Speculations." They sought to analyze the meaning and importance of the new emerging economy, seeking to answer 4 questions, 2 of which are of relevance to us. The other 2 had to do with the 9/11 attack and the NASDAQ crash. The 2 questions were, in the long run, how important will the ongoing technological revolutions in data processing and data communications turn out to be? Number 2, how should the way government regulates the economy change so as to maximize the benefits we reap from these ongoing technological revolutions? Here's what some of their qualified speculations yielded regarding the 2 questions. Quote, modern semiconductor-based electronic technologies fit Bresnahan and Trottenberg's definition of a general purpose technology, one useful not just for one narrow class, but for an extremely wide variety of production processes, one for which each decline in price appears to bring forth new uses, one that can spark off a long-lasting major economic transformation. So far, there are no good reasons to believe that the economic salience of high-tech industries is about to decline or that the pace at which innovation continues is about to flag. And there are good reasons to believe that the economic salience of high-tech industries will increase. Because of the general purpose nature of the technology, it has an enormous number of potential uses, many of which surely have not been developed. There has been a 4 billion-fold increase, and this is speaking from the perspective of 2001 at that time, there has been a 4 billion-fold increase in the world's raw automated computational power in 40 years, an annual growth rate of 56% per year. There is every reason to believe that this pace of productivity growth in the leading sectors will continue for decades. More than a generation ago, Intel co-founder Gordon Moore noticed what has become Moore's law, that improvements in semiconductor fabrication allow manufacturers to double the density of transistors on a chip every 18 months. Continuing in the paper, this particular explosion of technology has profound consequences for how we organize production. It has consequences for the type of goods we value. We used to live in an economy in which the canonical source of value was an ingot of iron, a barrel of oil, or a bushel of wheat. Such economies were based on the knowledge just as much as our economy is, but knowledge was of how to create a useful, physically embodied good. We are moving to an economy in which the canonical source of value is a gene sequence, a line of computer code, or a logo. Further, consumers will gain and shareholders will lose. Those products that can be competitively supplied will be at very low margins, and that's important for you economists. The future of the technology is bright. The future of profit margins of business, save for those that are truly able to use economies of scales to create mammoth cost advantages, is dim, end quote. But the advent of the new economy poses core economic issues yet to be resolved. Continuing, quote, high initial fixed costs and low, even zero marginal costs pose difficult questions, but also open up tremendous opportunities for economic policy. But with information goods, the social marginal cost of distribution is close to zero. One of the most fundamental principles of economics is that prices should be equal to the social marginal cost. In this case, strong intellectual property rights have the potential to decrease economic efficiency by driving prices away from marginal social cost. End quote. The question of goods at zero marginal cost will be most problematic in the new economy. Quote, we know that markets and the spur of competition are the best producers of applied knowledge, but we do not know how to use markets and competition for this purpose as far as information goods are concerned, and still satisfy the economic principle that the final consumer should pay no more than marginal cost, end quote. It is here that capitalism, as we have known it for 2 centuries, begins to unravel. As good neoclassicists, Summers and DeLong had earlier observed, quote, if we call the economy of the past 2 centuries primary Smithian, the economy of the future is likely to be Schumpeterian. In a smithing economy, the decentralized market economy does a magnificent job if the initial distribution of wealth is satisfactory at producing economic welfare. In a Schumpeterian economy, the decentralized economy does a much less good job. Goods are produced under conditions of substantial increasing returns to scale. This means that competitive equilibrium is not a likely outcome. Moreover, in a Schumpeterian economy, it is innovation that is the principal source of wealth, and temporary monopoly power and profits are the reward needed to spur private enterprise to engage in such innovation. The right way to think about this complex set of issues is not clear, but it is clear that the competitive paradigm cannot be fully appropriate, end quote. Their final speculations hint that in the face of goods produced at zero marginal cost, monopolies might have to be tolerated. Quote, an industry with high fixed costs and near zero variable costs has another important characteristic. It tends to monopoly. Good public policy in such an environment should make sure that the monopoly profits from the provision of things that become essential services are not too large, although they may need to be large to reward all the past investments, successful and failed in the market, end quote. So, as early as 2001, the captains of capitalism had begun to seriously weigh what the cost and benefits of information technology might be for the long-term future of capitalist economy. And it is in the seeds of these observations that, in fact, capitalism's game-ending contradictions might be. Jeremy Rifkin, an economic and social theorist, political advisor and activist and futurist, is also an economic advisor to Angela Merkel, the European Union, and the Chinese government, forecasts the emergence of a new economy which he dubs the sharing economy or collaborative commons, but involves decades-long plans for building of a new infrastructure based on something called the Internet of Things, IoT. This will be what he terms the third industrial revolution. He is a primary advisor to the European Union's Digital Europe and China Internet Plus plans, as well as Germany's Merkel. Rifkin reckons at least two broadly recognized industrial revolutions have occurred which have been central to the evolution of capitalism in the Western world, the first in Britain and the second in America. Each, he says, is characterized by the convergence of new technologies in three industries: communication, energy, and transportation. In the case of Britain, telegraphy and the powered printing press, steam, first from wood, then coal, and railroads. In America, the telephone, followed by radio and television, electricity, and later oil, and automotive power. These convergences led to new unprecedented levels of economic activity and prosperity in each country initially, spreading out to the West and then to the rest of the world. Trickle down. This third industrial revolution will converge the internet, renewable energies, and autonomous transportation intelligently linked by Internet of Things. The idea of Internet of Things, or IoT, is the network of physical devices, vehicles, home appliances, and other items embedded with electronics, software, sensors, actuators, and connectivity, which enables these things to connect and exchange data, creating opportunities for the more direct integration of the physical world into computer-based systems, resulting in efficiency improvements, economic benefits, and reduced human exertions, end quote. The idea of IoT is a result of the evolution of the convergence of multiple technologies, real-time analytics, artificial intelligence, commodity sensors, and embedded systems. Our understanding of economics is flawed, says Rifkin, because Adam Smith's notions were based on the metaphor of Newtonian physics, which, although a major advance in the understanding of laws of motion and gravity, really aren't laws adequate to grasp the nature of energy work as pertains to economies or the universe. Those are two of the laws of thermodynamics, conservation and entropy. What he is relating is the notion of aggregate efficiency. Higher aggregate efficiency, more so than better workers and machinery, Nobel Prize winner Robert Solow announced, is more essential to higher economic productivity. We, the United States, started the second industrial revolution in 1905 with 3% aggregate efficiency. By 1990, we got up to 14%, Rifkin says. By actuating a global Internet of Things that will allow everyone on this planet to begin directly engaging each other at a very low cost and bypassing vertical integrations of business and middlemen that keep us away from each other. This universal access for business and individuals to vital economic data carried in the IoT will allow dramatic changes in aggregate efficiencies and zero or near zero marginal cost production and distributed renewable energy production. When that occurs locally and globally, the sharing economy fully emerges in capitalism, although it will likely not disappear, Rifkin says, will not be the only vehicle of economic life. He believes we will have a hybrid economy that combines both. My conclusion. Clearly, the advancement of capitalism is tied into its use of technology to sustain its dynamics, produce profits, generate wealth at heretofore unseen levels, and proliferate. Even as economists Summers and DeLong speculated on what the implications of the new economy might be, the impact of exponential technologies as articulated by its visionaries as they believe that the application of science can change the exploitative, inegalitarian social relationships that structure society under capitalism, is in the final analysis speculative as well. David Harvey notes that virtually each new wave of technology in the past has held the promise of enabling an equitable socialist future. But that's not how it turns out, he says. You can't use a mechanism, that is capitalism, that creates poverty to eliminate poverty. One precept of dialectic materialism states that a series of quantitative changes can lead to a qualitative change. I think the exponential nature of computer technologies fulfill that. But the promise of those technologies, because of the promise of those technologies, a rigorous examination of them from a Marxian perspective is necessary. If these technologies, as their proponents believe, do have the potential to radically change capitalist modes of production and bring about heretofore unimaginable levels of prosperity for all human beings on planet Earth, do not those who have embraced the ideals of Marxism owe them serious consideration from every angle possible? Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations argued that capitalism was a preferable stage of human history to feudalism. But capitalism, for all its wealth-generating capacity, still generates unacceptable levels of inequalities as well. Might it not be time to move on from this stage of history as well? I am done.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. I have some information. Let me read this information. Kevin M. Sanders received his bachelor and master degrees in journalism at the Ohio University. He was also a floor broker at the Chicago Board Options Exchange at a particular point of time in his career. During 1989 and 1991, he served as the magazine editor of a journal, Jam Sessions. From 1991 to 2008, he was an assistant director at the Institute for Applied and Professional Ethics, Ohio University and was also the managing editor with the Ohio University College of Osteopathic Medicine. Since 2012, he has been vice president at the People Program International. It is a registered non-governmental organization, and vice president at the Palmer Institute. Sanders is particularly interested in media criticism as related to media performance. Being a journalist, Sanders has come to believe that journalism is really not a useful, insightful tool unless informed by political economy, geopolitics, and science. So, wonderful set of different questions. Technological singularities, nano, biotechnologies, augmented reality, Moore's law, and the necessity to revisit or maybe change neoliberal economic paradigm, because when marginal costs are close to zero or maybe zero, we have a new kind of economy. So please questions, and maybe the first questions, because you mentioned that there are social contradictions, and is it a way to socialism or communism, and is it a steady way or not? Or maybe we need some not technological but social revolution, maybe profound social changes as force industrial revolution, maybe must be combined with so a new social revolution.
Good question.
What do you think? What is your opinion?
Good question. I don't know if I have a good answer. I think what I can offer best are just observations. These technologies are if these technologies pan out the way the people who are creating them and are proponents of them, they clearly have the power, the potential to change everything we know about human life. Now, obviously, whether that happens or not is another question. And I do think that if some people like Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis are correct, there's no question that just the effects of these technologies could change everything, no doubt about it. But on the other hand, I think there are others, such as Rifkin, who are very much so aware of the fact that implementing these technologies are not going to be a piece of cake. As he said, it's going to be an uphill battle against big corporations. One of the realities about the Internet of Things platform is that it's going to require net neutrality. And I think probably a lot of you know the current FCC in America is head up by a guy who doesn't believe in net neutrality. He believes that the Internet should be divided up into lanes so that if you want faster access, you pay for that. That's not net neutrality. Net neutrality obviously allows anyone, anywhere on the planet who has access to the Internet to be able to surf and visit websites and conduct their business without paying extra or without any penalties, speed penalties. Now, sometimes, of course, there are speed penalties imposed by your Internet service provider, but in some of those cases, you can just change providers, but that is not a general provision for you to be held hostage once you sort of decide you want to surf on the internet and have to and not be able to get the same level of service as a big corporation might be able to get. Social revolution, I think the dominant mode of capitalist social relations, I've yet to see a society where that's really taken place. At least in my understanding, certainly I could be missing a country or a society. There are obviously countries that the social system is fairer than the social system of some of the Western countries, particularly America. So I think that some countries probably would be more suitable for a singularity type event that could change the way the way their economics operate. So that maybe, to be more example, the type of third industrial revolution that Jeremy Rifkin speaks of, the singularity event would just change everything anyway, so I take that back. I think, and I had something right here on the tip of my tongue, I have to think of it.
Yes. I think that we all must think of it because it's a new reality for the industrial revolution.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's new. I hope I did a fairly decent job in trying to present. Oh, yeah.
Is development of technology is only dependent on investment, or it is something else? Is it something to do with the social structure of the country that we are referring about? For example, still Russia sends Sputnik. I think USSR. This question is also directed to the chairman. Till when Sputnik was sent, way back in early 60s or late 50s, Russia was at the apex of scientific development, but it stagnated over the years. And America leapfrogged. So what it has to do, is it only the problem of investment, or it is also related to the social structure?
Well, I think there's a Rifkin is advocating an investment-oriented solution, but his investment-oriented solution has to do with building up the infrastructure for the Internet of Things, which he believes would pay for itself in the savings that you're going to have simply once the Internet of Things is in place. I think that in terms of the question of social structure, I think that in certain countries, like my country, America, Americans always seem to be a bit gung-ho about technology investments, so I don't necessarily think it would be an obstacle, not unless the powers that be saw what was coming down the pike. And I'm sure in that case, the question of social structure would be a problem for actually implementing some of these, having some of these technological changes bring forth the type of abundance that they believe that they could bring about. Now, in America, there's a thing, well, yeah, it's based in America. It's called the Singularity University, but it is an entrepreneurially based effort, so that all the things that they do are funded, you guess you could say self-funded. One of the things that they did, for instance, well, I'll mention two things. They have these things called X Prizes, where they are developing solutions to, as they say, some of the world's most pressing problems. So one of the X Prizes that I don't think has been awarded yet is for them to develop a handheld device that could be distributed at very, very low cost, that would teach, that would bring children up to a certain level of reading and numeracy in their own languages and at their own speed. That's an entrepreneurial project that they direct. Another entrepreneurial project that they have directed is the development of something similar to, if you're familiar with the Star Trek or program, it's similar to what would be a medical tricorder. That is, it's a handheld device that can be used by a consumer that could diagnose 15 very specific medical issues that you might have. The technology, I think this technology is going to come. The question is what speed it's going to come and how widely it's going to be implemented. I don't know if that answers your question at all. Okay. Absolutely.
Yes, and I have a note from organizers. We can check the rest of the questions, discussions during the tea. Thank you, and thank the organizers because it's also my field of research, and so it was a pleasure for me. I understood very well Kevin Sanders.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank our speaker and our chair and request Dr. Sunita Lal to present our speaker with the memento.